Wow, that is really, really, really interesting then. Now, these Bach flower remedies, do you use those quite a bit in your practice?
I'd say I probably use more acupuncture and homeopathy. You know, the Bach flower remedies, it's very obvious when you need to use them. They come up usually when there is more of an emotional component to something. You know, if you have animals that have fear-based problems, you know, 4th of July and there are fireworks, or a pet in the household has died and they're grieving and they've stopped eating.
Amazing.
Bach flower remedies can be very helpful in that instance. And they're also very gentle. If you have a pet that is very, very sick, their immune system is really weakened and you don't want to use a strong herb or a strong medication, sometimes just, you know, treating them very gently with the flower essences, aromatherapy, that sort of thing can be the way to go before you really hit them with the harder medications.
Wow, that's great.
Yeah.
You know, it's really interesting because there is an emotional component to, in other words, your pet also.
Oh yeah.
And I don't think a lot of people realize that there's that much of an emotional component to a dog or cat or what have you, right?
Yeah. Oh, there is, and you know, a lot of animals will develop illnesses. Like cats, for instance. If there is a cat that has moved into the neighborhood that's stressing your cat out in the house, they can develop urinary problems, urinate around the house, urinary infections. They can chew all of their fur off, skin problems, vomiting. Stress can really affect a lot of different diseases.
Amazing. We're going to come right back to that just in a second, Dr.
Okay.
Taylor. I'm going to go ahead and give our viewers the health tip of the week. The health tip of the week is muscle cramps. I know a lot of people come up to me and ask me about muscle cramps. What can I do for muscle cramps? Well, most of the time it's the deficiency of calcium. Now, you can use all different types of calcium. Sometimes some of the calciums won't work, but the best calcium that I found out is calcium lactate. Now, if calcium lactate doesn't work, then it's a deficiency of vitamin B6. And vitamin B6 creates vitamin F, and vitamin F takes calcium out of the blood and it will get rid of your calcium, get rid of your muscle cramps. So again, if you have muscle cramps, calcium lactate, vitamin B6, and your muscle cramps should go right away. So keep that in mind. Dr. Taylor, let's go back to that again. I want to go back to this emotional component with animals. How would somebody know that brought, say, their dog in, as an example, has an emotional component in there? How would you know for sure? How would you find out if it is emotional? By questions that you ask, or would you know by the behavior?
When an animal comes in, someone brings their pet in, on the first visit we always spend at least an hour talking to that person, and I encourage people to bring in all of their past medical records, any notes that they've taken, anything that they feel is significant. And a lot of times you, as the owner, know more than you think you know. And you know, if you pay a lot of attention to what they're doing, any changes in their behavior, anything that's going on that you may not even think is correlated to their illnesses at the time, it's important to mention that and bring it up. And it's the same thing when you're doing human homeopathy. These seemingly insignificant things that you wouldn't even occur to you that would be important to tell your doctor, you really should bring up. And I think that's why people like holistic medicine, because the veterinarian does take the time and is really truly interested in all of these seemingly, you know, insignificant details that people bring up. So it's very important.
Good. Well, let's talk a little bit about the difference between holistic veterinary medicine and your traditional Western veterinary medicine. Is there a fine line there? What is the difference? I mean, kind of just briefly, what would you say is the big difference?
Well, the type of medicine that I practice is called complementary veterinary medicine, and so I will use some Western modalities as well. I like to use whatever is going to work best on the pet, and so I do not rule anything out. You know, if I feel like an antibiotic is necessary temporarily, I will use it. Some holistic veterinarians really prefer not to do that, but my personal style is I want to use whatever is going to work and is going to be the gentlest and most effective. I think that traditional Western medicine, what happens is if you have an animal with an illness like an ear infection and they come in to see the veterinarian spends a very short period of time asking, what seem to be medically significant questions. And usually a diagnosis is made based on the symptoms. Maybe a couple of tests are done, an ear swab, that sort of thing. And antibiotics, anti-inflammatory medications are given, and the animal is sent, and it's done. And usually the ear infection will go away. In holistic medicine, we look at an ear infection not as a separate event. The ear infection really is tied into something more deeply wrong with the animal internally. So a lot of times when I was practicing Western medicine before I got into holistic, I would notice that a pet would come in with an ear infection. I would treat it. They would go home, and then 6 months later they'd come back with skin infection. I would treat it with antibiotics and anti-inflammatories. Next thing you know, they have intestinal problems and diarrhea. And it started to occur to me that these things have to be related. They really are related to sort of a more deeper underlying disease.
Absolutely.
And all we were really doing with the Western medicine is suppressing the symptoms, and it would come out again somewhere else. And that's basic tenet of holistic medicine, is that you look at the pet as a whole, you look at their entire past medical history as well as what's going on today that they're brought in for, and you treat them based on all of that as well as emotional components, their behavior, their preferences for food, warmth, heat, all the things that go into their life and their lifestyle.
Because it sounds to me like just traditional veterinarian medicine, Western, they're just kind of putting out fires. And
in a sense they are. In a sense they are. You really are putting out fires, and instead of looking at the forest as a whole. And you really have to look at the forest as, or the pet as a whole entity and their history. And, I think a lot of animals are born with chronic disease, just like with humans. We have a genetic predisposition to certain diseases. The environment plays a big part in it. And if things are coming up again and again and again, I think it's inappropriate to just keep putting these fires out. I think you really need to try to get to the source of the problem and create wellness in that pet as a whole.
Absolutely. Let me ask you a question. What types of illnesses respond best to holistic veterinary medicine?
Yeah, that's a good question, and I get that a lot. People call me and ask me, will my dog's skin problems respond? Will the arthritis respond? Does my cat's vomiting? Will that respond? And I think the things that you see the most dramatic responses to are these chronic, long-term diseases. If your cat gets hit by a car, sadly, and breaks its leg, Western medicine is going to work very well to fix that leg and take care of that problem. You can use, arnica, some adjunctive treatments to help them heal up more quickly. But when you have chronic problems like diabetes, epilepsy, cancer, things that are just not responding or being controlled or just barely controlled with Western medicine, you really need to get to the heart of the problem and try to treat this pet as a whole and make this disease go away instead of just keeping it under control.
So in other words, I like that. That is really, really interesting. Because when a pet comes in with some type of illness, you're going to get right down to the bottom of this, right down to the cause of this, instead of just putting out that fire.
You do try to do that, It can be hard, and a lot of animals I get have come to me. They're 10, 11, 12 years old. They've been treated, their entire lives with Western medicine. It can be hard to figure out exactly what's going on, and I think that to expect a cure at that point is probably difficult, but you can really increase their wellness and decrease the amount of Western medication they need to take and extend their life and their quality of life with holistic medicine.
Oh, that's great. Now let's talk about a pathology that everybody is afraid of, cancer.
Yeah.
Okay, let's talk about that pathology for a moment. Holistic veterinary medicine, would you treat cancer on that particular pet? Can it be treated? And is there a good response with that? I know that's a kind of a really
it's a broad
question. I understand. But if somebody came in with their pet and that pet did have cancer, there is some holistic ways that pet can be treated then. Let's
absolutely,
talk about that.
Absolutely. In fact, a lot of my patients I get initially into my practice have come in because their pets have cancer.
Amazing.
And people have sort of reached the end of the road with Western medicine. The chemotherapy's not working, surgery hasn't worked, these different modalities are not working, their pet is getting worse and worse. And so they really turned us in almost out of desperation. I think since we can't really do that, but we can offer a lot more than Western medicine in terms of boosting the immune system, extending their quality of life. Even if we can't get a cure for the cancer, we can't make it go away, you can almost always make them feel better, increase their appetite, extend their quality of life, send the cancer, at least temporarily, into remission. I never promise a cure.
Sure,
There
I
have been
understand.
instances in my practice where we have had some pretty miraculous things happen.
Great.
But I always give people the opportunity to make their pet feel better and to, at the very least, ease their way into a peaceful, gentle end if they need to go in that direction.